Hi, everybody. Welcome to season 2, episode 1 of Enotools University. This will be the first episode with video. You probably liked the last season without video better. I don't know. Anyway, I'm Joe. I'm still here after 20 years of selling things under the brand name Enotools, learning a lot about the industry. About 3 years ago, we got involved with Mr. Stefan Radu, his partner Olivier Henry, his partner in the U.S., Doug Manning, who's a 50-year tenured winemaker out there on the West Coast. Doug's been running around out there causing issues for people up and down the state for 5 decades now. He's a wealth of knowledge and experience. And I have 20 years experience cruising around the eastern part of the eastern half of the US, everything from the western border of Missouri to the Atlantic, everything from Texas to the Great Lakes. I don't go into Texas. Basically, I start at the bottom of Missouri and go up. Sort of, I dabble in Arkansas a little bit, but I work all the way over to Georgia and all the way up to Maine. And so, being a Finger Lakes native and a guy who lived on the West Coast for a couple of years, and I've also been lucky enough to go overseas here and there, Australia and Europe. Tasted a lot of wines, and I've learned a lot about everybody's process over the years. And I saw a need. So, Tools is involved with US Amade, which is Stefan Radu's organization selling tannin under the name Amade. So sometimes the package says Amade and sometimes it says EBX. EBX is a brand of Amade product. It's all tannin, and it's for every step of the winemaking process. So if I remember to say everything I'd like to say when I look at these slides, you're going to learn something today, I hope. I try to keep it basic. I have a very practical approach. I'm not a scientist, not a winemaker by trade, just a guy who loves wine and have a pretty decent nose. And all this stuff that we're about to discuss smells really, really good. So I think with that, I should start sharing screens and we can get this rolling. Here we are. So tannin from bin to bottle. Tannin comes in many forms. And what you see here, you see some oak chips or really small chips, maybe even granules. Here's some tannin powder. Here's some gallnut, some staves, and some liquid tannin. So it's available in many different forms. And please assume for the purposes of this conversation that barrels are in parentheses. We all know about barrels. We all know, Tools sells absolutely gorgeous barrels of every type. And I can talk to you about those later. Do you need tannin? Well, yes. You'd be surprised when I have conversations with people out there on the wine trail. It's amazing to me how so many people in areas where wine growing already is challenging enough, you would think, some folks are potentially leaving a little quality on the table by not taking advantage of a completely natural solution to problems they may not be aware that they have. In some cases, you try a wine and you can see that there was maybe just a little room for improvement, but it's otherwise good. And to me, does it pencil out to use these products to be able to possibly charge a little more or maybe sell a little more at the price it's already at? I don't know. That's your decision. But I just want to increase awareness about this because it's surprising to me how when I'm out there one-on-one with the winemaker and we're talking about their process, I'm trying to learn as much as I can. And so I like to ask questions. I like to hear the story about the vintage, about the varietal, about the wine. Try to talk about what's blended and if it is, and what attributes did each part of the blend bring. I found in the last couple of years out there on the trail that some winemakers who obviously know a lot more about tannin than I do have kind of forgotten a lot of what they know. And I equate this to learning a foreign language. I've studied 2 languages, one for 2 years, one for 3. And I think that I have to be in an immersive environment for those languages to come back. Um, so I think it's sort of like that with tannin. And sometimes there are winemakers out there who use a certain tannin, they swear by it, and they honestly can't remember why they started using it to begin with, but it's become part of their recipe. And I think it's time for questions. Sometimes there's not a full disclosure of every single ingredient in those tannin products. And sometimes use of one can necessitate the need for another. So it's important to know exactly what you're using and why you're using it to begin with. So here's a slide not designed to be snarky, but more or less just to provoke thought, I hope. Um, and hopefully you've been reading that while I've been talking. There are 2 main categories of tannin. Just to keep it brick simple, there's simple tannin and there's complex tannin. Simple tannin is oak tannin. Complex tannin is just about everything else. So in those tannin products out there in the marketplace, you'll find stuff like chestnut, gallnut, uh, quebracho wood. Man, I don't know why I can't pronounce that. Um, Grapeseed tannin, grape skin tannin, or lemon wood. So these are all sources of sources other than oak of enological tannin. Non-hydrolyzable condensed tannins. Oh boy, here we go. It's getting scientific. In essence, condensed tannins are for antioxidative effect. That's the long and the short of it. You can, check out, here's a concept, botrytis in general, sour rot. That usually necessitates a need for an antioxidative sort of additive. And you see again, a reminder, non-hydrolyzable condensed tannins are tannin other than oak, grapeseed, skin, etc. Helping to control the expression of mercaptans is a good application for those too. There will be a degree of astringency, but picture one of those red wines when you try it, that if you were to open it in 3 to 5 years, that it would be amazing. I'm suggesting that there's a link in this between the astringency, which might result from the application of condensed tannin, and the need to age a wine. I guess a fast to market wine might have different requirements. But I'm sitting here, as I say this, I'm bombarded with my palate memory of so many reds I had, which, I bought them because I felt like they were varietally correct and very expressive and, not flawed. And because I was having a great time and I loved the winery, and after all, people do buy the experience. And some of these, when you kind of forget about them when you get home, because there's another one in the wine rack right next to it that the last time you had it was pretty outstanding. So you reach for that one again. And then you do that for the next 3 to 5 years unconsciously. And then you go back to that bottle you bought that when the wine seemed tight, and maybe wasn't as velvety as you'd like on the palate. You open that same wine 5 years later and you're absolutely blown away by it. I think that's what we're thinking about when we say that over time, this will reduce over time. Hydrolyzable tannins, simple tannin. That drawing of that molecule does not look simple to me. Gallnut is kind of a unique thing since it's from the oak tree. It will have some oak tannin in it, but it also has the gallo tannin. And something to remember when you're out there shopping for tannins and for enological tannins, it's container size, it's dosage rate, it's cost per dose. But the other thing you need to be looking at is the gallic acid equivalent of the tannin you're buying. That's really where you get your bang for your buck. Another interesting thing is I have been unable to find a scientist willing to hand me a paragraph or send me an email that says in black and white that there's a link between the use of tannin and protein stability. But in general, the use for hydrolyzable tannin would be to, uh, to help avoid color loss, to hide green character, things like that. We'll get more into that. About color. Beautiful red wines tend to be maroon. Maroon, last time I checked, was red and blue. Reason why I say that is coming up. No, it sounds really obvious, sorry. And here's the scientific explanation for why beautiful red wines look like they're maroon. There's a blend of tannin there. The condensed tannins that come from grape seed, grape skin, etc., which would be in a wine that we haven't done any kind of enological tannin additive to. That tannin is there, but then the hydrolyzable tannin, which tends to be red or garnet in color. That is the wine with that tannin. The hydrolyzable tannin, in other words, simple tannin, in other words, oak tannin, is where there will be a sort of a shift from reddish to purplish or maroonish, which I think is a much richer color. There's a color conversion there, a shift from reddish to bluish, with the anthocyanin now stabilized thanks to hydrolyzable tannin. And again, I'm not a chemist, but I think you understand what I mean. It's harvest time. What do we use in the bin? Well, what's the situation? That's kind of like somebody walking up to you at a party and saying, what do you do? And you say, it depends on the situation. If you have a lack of maturity or overripe or rotten, sour rot fruit, or just a fruit that's kind of out of whack in terms of acidity, maybe it's the vintage, maybe it's the varietal at that site, that kind of a scenario. In your bag of tricks, you should have untoasted oak chips. There are a few suggestions here about, for example, overripe grapes. Untoasted chips, okay, well, that's going to boost the fruit. That's going to help the front end. Also help with color. Toasted granules, liquid blend of simple and complex tannin on the fruit. Again, the complex is there as an antioxidant, so maybe it'll stop the damage, or prevent further damage from the fruit being so overripe. The toasted granules will help the mid palate, add a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of structure, and maybe a whisper of sweetness. But I wouldn't be afraid to reach for stuff like that in that scenario. Lack of maturity, the reason why the chips, untoasted chips, or granular untoasted oak, that would be a good resource in a lack of maturity scenario, because simple tannins work to help eliminate green character. And a complex tannin, of course, again, antioxidative. Acid adjustments, that's interesting. To me, a wine with a lot of acid can hide a lot of sugar. And for that reason, if you were using different levels of toast from granules, if you went to medium toasted oak additive in that scenario, you would be creating a little structure, and also increasing the perception of sweetness. Fruit preservation, isn't that a lovely slide? Look at all those fruits we hope wine doesn't taste like or smell like. It's just colorful, designed to get your attention. The magic of gallic acid. Again, asking about that gallic acid equivalent when you are shopping for tannin. Here's why it's important. It's potentially a sacrificial antioxidant. There you go. Less oxidation of early aromatics released during fermentation. In other words, preserving the potential for aromatics in the glass for the customer. And also intensifies odor, intensifies aromas in red wine, which is nice. I think what I'm inferring from this slide, I've looked at it again and again, hoping that I would get the big aha and the light bulb would come on, The important part of this for me is if you're using these complex tannin additives in your wine and you have a high gallic acid equivalent, I think that you wouldn't have to be as heavy-handed on the free SO2 as you would be if you weren't using them. In fermentation, when you have challenges, here's a list of challenges and a list of solutions. Even some dosage rates here, which could come in handy. If you'd like a copy of this slide or some supporting literature, so that you can plan ahead and know what you should be ordering a couple of months before next harvest, feel free to drop me an email or give me a phone call, and I will send you this slide or send you some information on that. I don't know if reading it out loud is necessary, but you can see there are scenarios, there are solutions, there are dosage rates. So this begs the question, I'm sure you're already thinking about it. What are you using for fermentation tannin? In my experience, a lot of people out there on the wine trail are using untoasted chips. And that's good. A lot of people make them, a lot of people offer them. If you're looking for something in a box or a bag or a bottle, instead of using chips, there are a couple of products here made by US Amade, the EVX 810. I'm really embarrassed to say this, but it took me 2 years to figure out that the EVX 810 was not oak powder. It is tannin. It is untoasted French oak tannin powder, which is way different than that being oak powder. So yes, it's a little more expensive than oak powder, but the effectiveness is there. The price per dose makes it pencil out. It's pure oak tannin. 810 Structure Power is kind of a super product. It's a one product package that does the job of two of a competitor's product at the same time. It's a blend of complex and simple tannin, and it's not going to do something to the wine which will result in you having to buy more products from us to do the job you intended for it to do to begin with. Maturation. This is where it gets kind of dull. Whatever you're doing for maturation, yes, I love barrels. And I know people sell staves. We do. People sell wafers and barreled sticks. We do. You really can find just about any different way of the maturation phase with the application of oak. You can find every method you can imagine out there in the field. I've never personally seen a winery doing gigantic tanks full of fans of staves with a micro ox system. If I was at a winery where they did that, I probably walked right by it and didn't notice it. To me, it's not all that common in the Eastern Territory. We still have a lot of people using barrels. We have people using barrel sticks in old neutral barrels. We have people now, a new thing, we have folks using a tannin spray after steaming to stabilize their barrels in a bacteriostatic sort of situation with our EVX Protect. When the barrels are empty, they're using a tannin spray. And there's a small change in the lifespan of the barrel being a flavor infusion vessel because of that. There's a negligible, minimal change in flavor impact to the wine doing that. But the reason why we use oak in aging wine, whether it's a neutral barrel or a brand new barrel, or a room full of barrels which average out to 20% or whatever new oak on given wines, the reason why we do that is twofold. And it seems like this always comes back to preservation of the wine, basically, or expression of certain aspects of the wine, or building a picture frame around the fruit, those kinds of things. But here are a few scenarios for maturation, problems you might encounter. Too much acid, not enough acid, pyrazine, uh, a fear of oxidation, or a vegetal, pressed off kind of impression in the tank. Um, Staves will take longer than cubes, which will take longer than chips. Chips are they're a good tool. If you like using a bag of oak chips, great. I'm not going to throw rocks at you. I know why you're doing it. I can see why it works. It's a little bit of an inexact science though with chips, because it's sort of like I don't know, if you were drag racing in a car with a turbocharger, you stomp the accelerator to the floor, the turbo spools up, and then you panic for whatever reason and take your foot off the accelerator. The car's not done building power yet, and it kind of keeps going. That's sort of what happens with chips. It's best to be on the safer side with chips and underdose, um, because it's really not done doing what it's going to do in terms of infusion at the moment that you take it out. You're still going to have a sort of latent effect once it's removed. Um, anyway, the staves are, if you think of staves like you think of barrels, um, have a period of time in mind to use them. I think they're probably a little bit more controllable than chips, but what's even more controllable than either of those is a liquid tannin. And we have, of course, dosage rates here, suggested dosages for different scenarios. So, on the concept of oak tannin and microoxygenation, the integration phase, which would take place in a barrel during maturation, there's a couple of good names in the industry, folks who've done some research. You have theories about polymers and monomers. Bottom paragraph, you see a reference to monomeric anthocyanins. Um, Paragraph above the bottom one, you see a reference to polymeric anthocyanins. So basically, if we're trying to tie up green character, um, the combination of oak tannin and oxygen, um, the theory is that that's how that happens. Um, there is some stabilization of color and a softening of the grape tannin, the aging in the barrel, and the addition of oak flavors and aromas, and of course the help in terms of balance and expression and finish that oak can have. So those of you who know me, probably not surprised to hear me say you can't swing a cat without finding a source of staves. It's probably a Joeism of some sort. Anyway, yeah, you can buy staves just about anywhere. And back in the old days, people were afraid of end grain on these staves. I think those same people probably think that wind comes from trees. Um, anyway, because there are rays in the wood, there's porosity, there's all these features of the grain itself. When you're talking about a person like Stefan Radu at US Amade, a guy whose family was in the barrel business forever, he's a fifth generation French cooper. A company like Amade is going to know where the good wood is. They're going to know that um, they're doing a job for the environment by selling oak alternatives. And not to greenwash, but think about it. We can only make about 10 barrels from one tree. We can treat 35 times that amount of wine using oak alternatives. Now, when you think about your cellar, think about those gorgeous artisan cooperage built storage vessels, which have three jobs: storage, flavor infusion, oak integration. Um, when you think about that, and then think about how you could be having a very similar result with a product like a stave, well, it's tempting. So you start looking at the staves or the sticks. Consider the source, because you really want to be buying from someone who's 100% consistent in their sourcing, culling, aging, processing, toasting, And you want to be able to buy a very similar stave time after time after time, because the last thing you need in your process is another variable. Finishing. Okay, now it's picking up. This part's a lot more fun. It's really, really simple when you're looking at a finished wine. What would you like to change about it? Even if it's a good wine and you sit there and you try it, and let's say it's a great wine. Let's say it's one of your favorites. When you sit there and try it, you might find yourself thinking about things like, do I want to help the front of this wine? In other words, the fruit, the nose, the middle, does the mid palate need a little help? Or is the finish a little too abrupt? Or is it more acidic than it is sweet? Or is it more sweet than it is acidic? And how the alcohol percentage in that, plays a role also. Well, we're not going to tweak the alcohol or the sugar, but there are tools out there in the enological tannin world that you can use towards the finishing stage of the wine to steer it a little bit differently, to sublimate certain things, to accentuate others. And so here are a list on this page. We have a list of challenges and some suggested solutions with, my favorite would be the liquids, but you can also go with granules. And, they're saying medium plus on otherwise balanced wine, which with a pyrazine issue. My guess would be that would work because we're adding to structure, we're increasing the perception of sweetness. Probably also the oak tannin itself, maybe at that point can still bind with, the impression of green. I don't know. I'd have to look into that. I'd like to ask a chemist about that, but that's my suspicion. To prevent oxidation at a low dosage rate, like 5 to 15 milliliters per hectoliter, totally worth it. That would be in a rosé or a white wine if you're looking to, maintain the color and clarity and preserve the fruit, lock up the potential for aromatics. We're talking about a practically imperceptible amount of oak. If you were to use, a pure, like untoasted French liquid tannin, something with, no gimmicks, a nice gentle flavor profile, not overheated, not over squeezed or anything like that. A low pressure, low temperature extraction process, untoasted French oak liquid tannin, hiding in one of your whites or your rosé, at a low dose rate like that would be just what the doctor ordered. Something back to the top of the list, something with firm acidity. Notice again, medium plus. We're increasing the perception of sweetness to complement the acid, bringing the wine back into balance. And maybe it's something that isn't traditionally oaked. I'm reminded of a Sauvignon Blanc from the North Fork in a second fill 400-liter water bent D&J barrel. I had not been there, boots on the ground in person, to do a barrel sample out of that in its first fill because of the pandemic. But I had never knowingly had a Sauv Blanc that was fermented in a barrel. At least I couldn't remember which ones I had were. And I was so genuinely impressed by that wine. It had firm acidity. It had, it was varietally expressive. You'd know it was a Sauv Blanc if you had been doing this job for any amount of time. If you're a white wine drinker, blindfolded, you'd know it was a Sauv Blanc. I mean, it was perfect for the varietal, but the addition of that very, very subtle amount of oak was amazing. Lack of acidity, for me, I would probably lean towards a lighter toasting enological tannin additive. Lack of structure, here you go. See the reference to American oak under lack of structure? Yes. Mid palate support. Think about those guys in California, those lucky dogs who have all those tons per acre, all those degree heat days, perfect growing conditions, except in those really traumatic years where it rains more than once between April and October. They have the ability to get those grapes so ripe that sometimes, you know, the pH is high, the Brix really high, and you end up with high alcohol. And now they need something to hold up the middle of that wine. And you've got this big, bombastic, like, you know, gorgeous, lovely, uh, huge bodied red. And, you know, the kind of wine that you just want to sit next to a campfire with all by itself. Um, that calls for American oak. And you know, you can use some French in that blend too, but if you're sourcing some really ripe reds and you find yourself looking for just a touch more structure or a little bit lengthier finish, you probably want to go with like a combination of French and American in additives in that situation. Oh my gosh, how did this slide get in here? This is it's a shameless endorsement for my liquid tannins, which are made in a low pressure, low temperature scenario. And the process is exact. 100% repeatable results the way that Mr. Redu is making these things. These are so fun to play with, it's not even funny. So I was in Tennessee and I tried a Cynthiana port, which was delicious and lovely. And I don't know, it was like every dried red fruit you can think of, pretty strong in alcohol. It was sweet, and it was a really good port. One of those that when you opened it, you'd probably, you know, grit your teeth because you opened it when you did. Like you want to hang on to this one. So what I do, I actually bought a few bottles. What I do is I have one that's open and I gas it with that inert gas spray and slap the cork back in across my fingers. But I was playing with it there on site where it's made, and I reached for the American, which is the EBX number 22, American plus, sorry, medium plus toasted American um, liquid tannin. And I used a pretty small amount. I think it was around 15 milligrams per hectoliter equivalent in my test. And I'm telling you, it went from that port that you want to have in front of a fire to like are sitting inside on an old leather couch in front of your fireplace on a, you know, quiet night. It went from that to a port that you would want to be on the old leather couch with a blanket and someone was hugging you. I know, I'm hoping you're laughing right now. Anyway, it just was amazing. It was exactly what it needed. Imagine graham cracker and toasted marshmallow in a bottle. um, this stuff is good. So the French are kind of in an array, and we think of these as primary colors. So all the liquid tannin that's out there on the market is probably kind of similar, but this one stands out. When you smell this stuff, if you were out there in the world and you're trying to get a date with a winemaker, dab a little of the medium toasted French liquid tannin, you know, behind each ear, maybe, you know, on your forearm, and just kind of hang around with them for a minute. They'll notice. Again, I should have been a comedian, but the EBX10 is pure tannin from untoasted French oak. So this is barrel quality aged wood that they've then put through the low pressure, low temperature, you know, very clean water, you know, 100% organic process to get this liquid tannin. Number 12 is light toasted French. Number 13 is medium. Number 14 is medium plus. So you get it. These are primary colors. I was at a winery in Iowa and I tried a very, very good Marquette, probably one of the best wines in the state. And it was varietally correct. I mean, it tasted like the poster child for Marquette. It was clean, it was technically sound, it was a great bottle of wine. And I would serve it with something like a pretty robust pasta dish. Not sure that I would reach for it to have it all by itself. So what I did was I very respectfully inquired with the man who made it to see if he would be okay with us playing with some tannin with that wine. He agreed. He was curious. So we got it out. I got out about 5 glasses, and I had a control, and then I had different glasses with each formula in them, and then I combined them according to what I was trying to do to the middle and the finish of the wine, because I thought it had more than enough fruit. I thought it had ample fruit. So first we build a little frame around the fruit with just a touch of the light toasted French, very, very low amount. And then I wanted to hold up the middle a little bit to match that. And then I wanted to stretch out the finish. So I did my blend, put it all back together, slid a glass to him, pulled a glass to me. We each tried our control again. Then we tried what I created. And both of us agreed, he even smiled. Both of us agreed that we changed it from the wine that was great with food to the wine that even folks from out of town, from the western side of the US, even folks like that who are accustomed to those, wines that are on a larger balanced scale, might consider drinking this one all by itself, just because of the way that we were able to tune it. Now, to me, that's great. Leaving quality on the table just doesn't seem like a good plan. And, if you're a tinkerer like me, if you like to take things apart and make them work better, if you're that kind of a winemaker who wants to make sure that the thing that you loved about the wine that you made is the thing that stands out, these are a great tool. Okay, Q&A time. Just kidding. Yeah, that's on there. You can email me at joe@enotools.com. You can call 607-426-0434. You can bounce around on my website. You can ask to, play Stump the DJ. Send me a challenge. Like, what kind of a problem are you having that you think tannin can be the solution for? And I will circle the wagons. I'll get Doug, Stefan, his partner Olivier, whoever it takes, involved to rise to the occasion, rise to the challenge, whatever, if the occasion arises or something like that. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to, watching season 2, episode 1 of Enotools University, which is all about tannin from bin to bottle. Now, if you would, please realize that I say this jokingly. Get back to work.